In this lecture, we are going to work on implementing lazy loading for the routes which we have in our application. So if we go to our application, currently you will see for this application we have three routes. We have home page, we have counter page, and we have courses page. Also, whenever this application is initially loaded, all the files related to this application will be loaded during the initial load. Now in our case, this application is very small. It only have 3 pages and few components. So that's why loading this application is not taking much time. But in a very large application where you have hundreds or thousands of components, you have a lot of pages in your application, there, if we are going to load all the application files during the initial load, then the initial load will become slow. It will take some time to load entire application, and it will also affect the performance of the application. Currently, what is happening in our application is, let me go to network tab and let me clear everything first. And if I restart this application, all the files related to this application is downloaded during the initial load. Now what I want is, when this application is loaded, I only want to load the files related to home page. Then when we go to counter page, at that time only all the files related to counter page should be downloaded. And when we go to courses page, at that time the files related to courses page should be downloaded. In this way, what will happen is the initial load will be faster because we have to download a smaller file during the initial load. And then whenever we move from one page to another page, the file related to that page will be downloaded. Okay, and this is called as lazy loading. So in this lecture, we are going to implement lazy loading for the counter as well as for the courses. Let's go to our application. Let me close all the files. Okay, and now in this counter folder, I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call it as counter.module.ts. So here I'm creating a counter module. Now, as you might already know, a module is nothing but a class. So here I'm going to create a class and I'm going to call it as counter module. And let's also export this class so that we can import it in other modules. And now to make this class a module, we need to decorate it with ngModule. And to use this ngModule, we need to import it from Angular/Co. So this is the first step. Now to this ngModule, we will pass an object, and in that object, we have properties like declaration, which is going to be an array. Then we have imports, which is again going to be an array, and we have exports, which is going to be an array. So in the declarations, you're going to specify what components are related to this module. In the imports, you need to specify what other modules you're going to import for this counter module. And in the exports, you can specify what you are going to export from this counter module, which can be used in other modules. Now, one thing which you need to remember here is, since we are creating a custom module here, the first thing which we need to import here is CommonModule from Angular/Common. This we need in all our custom modules. Now, what I'm also going to do is, for this module, I'm going to define some routes. So here I'm going to create a routes variable, which is going to be of type routes array. And to use this routes array, we need to import it from Angular/router. Okay. And in here, we are going to define some routes for the counter component. Now, what I'm going to do here is, I'm going to open AppModule, RouterModule. And in the RouterModule, we have defined this path for the counter component. So I'll copy this. Actually, I'll cut it from here. Let's go to CounterModule.ts and let's paste it there. And here the path will be empty. And here we want to import counter component. So let's do that. Let's import counter component. So we only want to have this route for our application. Now here I'm not specifying the path. You will understand it why. But since we are creating a route here, let's also go ahead and let's import router module. And to import this router module, we need to import it from Angular/router. And on that, this time instead of forRoot, we are going to call forFeature. And to this forFeature method, we are going to pass this routes array. Now, why we are using forChild? Okay, it's not forFeature, it's forChild. So why we are using forChild here? Because this route which we are defining, we are only defining it for CounterModule. We are not defining this route for the entire application. We are only defining it for this CounterModule. So here we have created our route and we are adding it to the router module. Now for this module, we are also using this counter component, and we also have other child components for the counter component, which we want to declare inside this counter module. So what we are going to do is, let's go to AppModule.ts file, and from there, whatever component we have related to counter module. So here we have counter value component, counter button component, and custom input component. These are related to counter module. So I'll cut it from here and I'll add it in this declarations array. Okay, and we also need to import them. So let's go ahead and let's import them one by one. Okay, and here we are also going to add this counter component. Let's format the document. All right, now let's go back to appmodule.ts, and from here we can remove these import statements which is not required. Okay, let's save the changes. And from here, let's also remove this counter component because we have added it in the counter module. Now let's go to app routing module, and there what we are going to do is, here we are going to define a new path, and here the path will be counter. So in here you see we have specified the empty path, because for this we are specifying the path as counter here, but whenever the path is counter, instead of loading a component, now we want to load a module. And to load a module, what we need to do is we need to use loadChildren. To this we need to assign a function, and what this function is going to do, it is going to import. So we need to use this import statement, and there we need to specify the path of the module. So in our case, the path of the module will be ./counter/counter.module, right? And let me move it to a separate line to make it more readable. Now here, this is going to return us a promise. On that, we are going to use then method. So when that promise is resolved, we are going to get a list of modules. So I'm going to store it in M. And from that list of modules, we want to filter counter module. Okay, and we want to load that. And with this, we have implemented the lazy loading for the counter module. Now, whenever we will go to counter page, it is going to load this counter module. And when the counter module will be loaded, its related components like this counter component, counter value component, counter button component, and this custom input component will be loaded at that time. Now, if I go to our application, first of all, you will see that here we have an error and it says can't bind to ngModule. Now, why we have this error? We have this error because in the counter module, we are using this ngModule for two-way data binding. And to use this ngModule, we also need to import the FormsModule for this counter module. Otherwise, the ngModule will not work inside the counter module. So for the counter module, let's go ahead and let's import FormsModule. And with this, that error should be gone. So you see that error is gone. Now let me go to home component. Let me again go to network tab here. Let's clear everything. So when I load the page for the first time, we are in the home page. So all the files related to our application and this home page has been downloaded. So style.js has been downloaded. The font file has been downloaded. Then CSS file has been downloaded. So all the application related files have been downloaded. Now let me clear everything here. And now if I go to counter module, this counter page, there the code related to this counter module has been downloaded now. Initially, it was not downloaded. Only when we moved from home page to counter page, it was downloaded. And since we are not lazy loading this courses page, the code related to this courses page was downloaded during the initial load. Now we are also going to make this courses lazy load. But if I save the changes now and if I go to the counter page again, you see it is not going to download the code related to this counter page again. It will only load when we move from one link to this counter link for the first time. All right, now let's go back and let's do the same thing. Let's create a module for courses also. So let me close this, and in the courses folder, so let's close this counter folder. Let's go to this courses folder, and in there, let me add a new file and let me call it as courses.module.ts. Okay, and again, we know that a module is nothing but a class. So let's go ahead and let's create that class and let's call it courses module. Let's decorate it with ngModule decorator. Here, let's pass an object. There, let's specify the declarations array. Let's specify the imports array and let's specify the exports array. All right, now let's go to AppModule.ts. Here, whatever we have related to the courses component, I'm going to cut it from here and I'm going to add it in courses module declaration array. So we have course card component and add course component. Let me cut it from here and let me paste it. And let's also go ahead and let's import them. Let's format the document. All right, and from here, let me also remove the courses component because we have added it in the courses module now. And in the main module, in our root module, in the app module, I want to have app component, home component, and header component. Let's save the changes in this file and let's also remove the unnecessary import statements. Okay, let's also remove these two import statements. All right, let's save the changes. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to create a route for this courses module. So in here, again, let's create a routes constant, which is going to be of type routes array. And to use this routes array, we need to import it. And in here, I'm going to define one route, which is this route. So maybe I'll cut it from here and let me add it here. Okay. And here, first we need to import CommonModule. That is important because here we are creating a custom module. So for that, first we need CommonModule, and then I'm also going to import RouterModule. And here again, I'll say forChild, and to this, I'm going to pass this routes which we are creating. So this routes is for this courses module. Okay, and here the path will be empty. Let's save the changes. Now let's go to app routing module, and in here, let's specify the path. So here I'll specify the path as courses. And when the path is courses, we want to load the courses module. So again, we are going to use loadChildren. To this, we are going to pass a function. Okay. And what this function is going to do is, let's go ahead and let's import a module. So here I want to go to courses folder. And in that courses folder, we have courses module. So we want to load this module and it is going to return us a promise. We are going to wait for that promise to be resolved. And when that promise is resolved, what we want to do, from the module list, we want to select the courses module. That's it. Let's save the changes. And from here, I can remove these two import statements. All right. Here somewhere we have an error. Okay, this semicolon should not be there. Let's save the changes now. So this is done. So we don't need to change anything else in the app routing module. I'll close it. In the courses module also, everything looks fine. Let's go to our application. And here we have an error, and it says we have an error at this line. That's because in the courses component, we are also using the reactive form module. So we also need to import the reactive form module. So let's go ahead and let's import reactive form module for this courses component. Let's save the changes now. Let's go to our application, and we do not have any error. Let me open network tab again. Let's clear everything. Let's go to home page. Okay, and let me reload the page. So during the reload, all the application files has been downloaded. Let me clear this. When I go to counter component, you will see that the file related to the counter component has been downloaded. Let me clear this. And when I go to courses component, the files related to courses component has been downloaded. So in the courses component, along with the code of the courses module, we also have this javascript.jpg file and angular.jpg file, which we are using for displaying these courses. So those related files have also been downloaded, which we are using in the courses module. So now this counter module and this courses module, it is being lazily loaded. And there are two advantages of this. The first advantage is it is going to improve the performance of the application. And the second advantage is it is going to help me explain the other concepts which we are going to learn in NgRx. So this is all from this lecture. In the next lecture, we are also going to lazy load the state related to a feature. So let's see how we can do that in our next lecture. This is all from this lecture. If you have any questions from this lecture, then feel free to ask it. Thank you for listening and have a great day.